This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We passed the 6-minute mark in our countdown for Apollo 11, flight to land, first men on the moon. We're on time at the present time for our planned liftoff of 32 minutes past the hour. Coming up shortly, that swing arm up at the spacecraft level will come back to its fully retracted position. This should occur at the 5-minute mark in the count.
Yeah, now step off the land now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 2,
Close-up of the United States edition of Sputnik was made at a press conference with leaders of the scientific teams, Dr. Werner von Braun, Dr. James Van Allen, and Dr. William Pickering, a three-way collaboration between private industry, academic science, and the military.
Commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space.
So there's a lot of details to highlight about the Sebenza 21 Lunar Landing Edition, starting off with the Lunar Landing Module, the Eagle. Remember, guys, the good old Eagle has landed. Next up, we have the Chrysocolla Cabochon inlay that kind of resembles the Earth in the moon horizon as the astronauts would have seen it. Speaking of astronauts, the Apollo 1 crew is commemorated with the astronaut and the shot of the American flag. And lastly, on the lock side, you're going to conveniently find the astronaut footprint followed up with the coordinates of the first lunar landing mission, the Apollo 11. Now, just to add a little snazz, I did add a millet clip on the lock side there to kind of resemble the rocket. Sebenza 21, as usual, rocks the S35VN steel, which I'm a big fan of. This is the small 21, so all the proportions are on the smaller side, but it still features all the beefy lock system and the uniform screws that a Sebenza offers, just in a more compact size, kind of a close to a 3-inch blade, and still a very pocketable but yet sturdy little knife. So as far as the Sebenza 21, let's do a little bit of a tabletop and see what this knife is really all about. And I also suggest, if you want to see a more detailed Sebenza video, check out my large Sebenza video. But for now, let's take a journey into the Small Sebenza Lunar Landing Edition. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Knife Box channel. So today we're going to talk about something I really enjoy. We're going to do a little history lesson and kind of what I consider world history, I guess. And that's going to be kind of the story of the Apollo 11 and what led up to it. And we're also going to talk about the Sebenza 21. I decided not to do a very lengthy talk about this knife because I did a Sebenza video already. And please go check that out. It's got my whole philosophy on the Sebenza 21. And I asked the main question, is it viable in today's market? Absolutely. And this knife is no exception. So as a matter of fact, just for size comparison, let's bring out that knife from the review. This is the large Sebenza 21 tanked edition, and this is the small Sebenza 21 Lunar Landing Edition, which is going to be tonight's feature. So as you can see, it's just really a scaled down version. The only thing I kind of noticed a bit of a difference between these two, and there's maybe about a 2 or 3 year production difference, but to be fair also that these are two different sizes, and I haven't handled a whole lot of small Sebenza 21s, but I noticed on this one it's not quite as hollow as its larger counterpart, and that could just be a small to large Sebenza 21 thing. It could be a production date change thing, I don't know. But that's kind of like the only thing. Other than that, they're pretty much identical and scaled down. So very, very cool. Let's do some more size comparisons so you guys get an idea of what we're talking about here. Let's bring out here this guy right here, the ZT-0450. These used to be everywhere, little mod monsters. Very comparable in size. Spyderco Delica, very popular. Also very comparable in size with the 21. What else do we want to bring here? Let's bring out the Benchmade Bug Out. A bit larger on the bug out, but not by much. And finally, let's bring out the Pelican. Something I've been really enjoying carrying, by the way. It's a cheap little 25, 45, I don't know, something like that, dollar knife for 60 bucks or something. Anyways, it's really quite cool, but we'll do a video on that at a later time. So as you can see, it kind of falls in that pretty standard mid-size small ADC category. All right, so very carryable in the pocket, although it's a bit heavier compared to some of these other knives that I have on the table, especially like something like this bug out right here. But it's really not something that I feel bothering me in the pocket in any way, shape, or form. So if you guys are curious kind of the weight on the small Sebenza 21, and we are still sub 3 ounces, 2.97 ounces. So pretty good there. So the Sebenza 21 small. Honestly, guys, one thing that I really dig about this knife is that it is small. It's very small, but it's not too small to be a primary blade. I find that it's really actually a nice full 4-finger grip, and it's thanks to that good old neutral handle design that I absolutely adore. And you got just enough basically retention right here on the front end. This is a really well designed handle, and that's one of the reasons why the Sebenza 21 is really a go-to for me. It's just the simplicity and elegance of the whole thing. It's just a really well designed knife. In the smaller version, would I prefer to pick up the bigger one? Absolutely. But this small one has its own place and its own rights. And Some people might prefer a smaller version. This might be a little bit more office setting friendly, so kind of cool for that. I did change a couple things. So if you end up looking around for a lunar landing, it's going to have a typical black lanyard. I bought this one from the Chris Reeves website. It's an additional accessory, but it's a factory one from Chris Reeves. And then the clip I changed over to a millet clip because I thought it looked kind of space rocket-ish and kind of matched the whole thing. So I really, really, really dig it. The rest of it's kind of as is. On this side right here, you got the astronaut footstep and the coordinates where the Apollo 11 team landed. You got the Boise, Idaho, where the knife is made up front. Typical Reeve integral lock knife, plenty of access to disengage the lock bar, all unified screws, just, pivot, busher, pivot washer design. Which is one of the things that Sebenza is really known for. I mean, the knife is just, it's pretty much like got everything you need for longevity and plenty of use and all that good stuff. Now, on the front side, the CCG graphics are actually really cool. And you can see it on my large one too, that there is some bronzing to it, which is even more kind of a goldish on this one. You can see here right up there, and then on the Eagle lander itself there's quite a bit of gold that's been lasered in, which is really quite cool. It gives it just a little splash of color. And then here you got this little jewel that's been pressed into the frame, which looks really nice. Just gives that whole appearance of the Earth from the moon horizon. So absolutely outstanding knife. Definitely teaches a little bit about history, and if you really look into this story a little bit more, I really encourage you to start. I encourage you to start with the launch of the Sputnik 1, because in all honesty, guys, there was so much going on in the world at that time. Do you think there's turmoil going on right now? Which there is. Back then they were facing the nuclear war between Russia, the Iron Curtain. You also had like the Cuban Missile Crisis around that time. You had the space race, which was basically whoever gets to, space first is going to be the dominating power. And there was only two countries pursuing that, which was the US and the Russians. Now, what's really interesting to me, or kind of a twist of fate, if you will, is that a lot of, historians will agree that the Russians should have been the first to land on the moon way before us. And there's really one main reason why people think that way. One of the reasons why is because, the Russians were the first to land the first to shoot something into outer space, right? The satellite, the Sputnik 1. Then, not long after, they shoot a dog into space and bring him back safely. First launch of an animal or a living thing into space and bringing it back safely. And then after that, first launch of a man orbiting around the Earth into space. And these were all Russian achievements while we're still back home trying to figure out how to launch a darn satellite, which ended up happening. Now, the reason that the Americans kind of also were held back is because one of the German Nazi captured scientists, where the Nazis were actually developing this rocket, was captured, brought over to America at some point, and turned into an American citizen in exchange for working with the US military on these rocket projects. And eventually, Von Braun is his name, was obviously enthusiastic about doing some space projects. Well, the last thing the Americans wanted was to have a former Nazi or a German scientist get involved with their first launch into space. And their first few attempts really failed because of it, until eventually he knocked on NASA's door and said, "You have got to let us get involved. The Russians are winning." And as soon as he did, then that's when the success started rising with the United States and successful launch of this and that. And the history goes all the way up to the Apollo 11. And the other reason, kind of the interesting twist on the east side of the world, where they were trying to accomplish landing a man on the moon first, was that the difference between America and the Russians is the Russians had two main leaders. We had NASA, which was working with JPL and other privateers like IBM and Lockheed, were all involved in the one space program. You had two guys that were kind of the main leaders in the space projects in Russia. So you kind of, in a sense, had like two NASAs, and they weren't working together. They were actually trying to outdo each other each and every time. And the budget was getting split left and right. And a lot of people attribute that to the reason why Russia never landed on the moon prior to the Americans, was just that those two companies and the split of the budget, not focused on one single project. Whereas the Americans kind of went more of the privateer route with JPL and Lockheed and IBM and so on and so forth, and all collaborating on one project, which before the turn of this century, just like President Kennedy announced, we landed our first man on the moon. And we've landed actually 5 times after that, which was pretty cool, actually. I don't believe anybody else in the world did that. And then after that, 1973 marked the beginning of the space station, and they started working on that. And that's kind of the end of the search for stuff on the moon, per se, and nobody's gone to the moon since. So I hope that was a fun little history lesson. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you've been on the fence on getting a Sebenza 21 or 31 small, because you think it might be a little bit too small, in all honesty, guys, even compared to something a little bit more medium in size, it's a great EDC option. Still a good full 4-finger knife. So hope you guys like this video. If you guys get in the mood, go geek out on some space stuff and check all that stuff out. There's plenty of resources everywhere out there. And we'll see you guys all on the next one.